This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Patrick Southern is a freelance assistant editor who has recently worked on documentaries for A&E, National Geographic, and the Lifetime Movie Network. Hello, Patrick. Welcome.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having me.
I have done my homework. Okay. You were born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
That's true, yes.
What got you, this is not a media-centric environment. What got you interested in editing from there?
Interestingly enough, my father was a photographer, and originally I wanted to be a cinematographer. I wanted to put images in motion. And I went to college at Oral Roberts University and got a degree in multimedia and moved out to Los Angeles to become a cinematographer and quickly found out that there are many people who are better at that than I.
Now, did you come out to Los Angeles with no connections at all?
No connection. Well, I say that. I had one connection. I had worked at an Apple store in Oklahoma. And I worked in the one-to-one program, which is a training program, and taught Final Cut and Logic and a few other applications. And one of my students happened to have a son-in-law who had a brother.
So there's your connection.
There's my connection.
Who had a cousin.
Right, absolutely. So I met him, and he was my only connection, but I didn't have any work when I first came out here. So my wife and I actually started working as not even extras. We were audience members, paid audience members for various studios in town.
Seriously? There's a job like that?
There is.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, $8 an hour, and when there's two of you and you get free food, it's a pretty great gig. So.
Yeah, it takes care of lunch for that day.
It absolutely does, yeah.
Well, you were teaching one-on-one at the Apple Store in Tulsa. Is that where you got your training on the editing tools you used, or did you have mentors, or did you take classes, or what did you do?
Well, it's kind of a mix. In college, we learned Avid, and then I worked at the university's media department for a while and learned Final Cut 7 there, and then became certified in 7 at the Apple Store. And then shortly thereafter, they released 10, and everybody hated it, including myself at the time, but I still had to teach it. So I got certified in 10 and noted very quickly that when it came to teaching Final Cut 7, it took a lot longer to get a concept across than teaching Final Cut 10. In fact, there was an 80-year-old woman that came in, and she'd been learning iMovie, and everybody accuses Final Cut of looking like iMovie Pro, which is a valid argument, I suppose. But she went from learning iMovie to being able to ingest, organize, edit, do some color grading, effects, and titling, and sharing a movie all within an hour. So I thought that was very interesting. So moved out here with that training, not knowing cinematography, learned I was not so great at cinematography, and then started pursuing editing from there.
So what kind of projects are you working on currently? I mean, I was reading this editing, you've been here, what, a year? And you're working for A&E, and you're working for Lifetime Movie Network, and you're working for National Geographic. Editors have been here for 10 years would kill for gigs like that.
That they would. I've been here for 3 years. But just the last year has been in television. So again, started out doing audience work, and then ended up, the one contact that I had here in LA, he ended up getting me a job at a creative firm in Burbank, and I worked there for about a year and a half. Went through some training at a place called the Power Edit Academy. And
what?
The Power Edit Academy. There's a gentleman.
Let me Google that for a second there. Let me see if this is it legit?
It is legit.
All right.
Yeah. There's a gentleman named Jeff Barch who works in reality television.
Oh, I know Jeff.
You know Jeff?
I like that. Yes, Jeff's great.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I read his book, Edit Better, while I was working at the creative firm and thought, man, this is some great content. So.
Oh, this place. Okay. All right. No,
yeah.
Okay.
So
I met him. Can he go to school there?
That's legit.
Okay, good. We're continuing.
So I met up with Jeff to talk about his book, and he said, I've got this thing called the Power Edit Academy. So I took his class. And at the end of his class, we'd gone through a number of things in terms of non-scripted editing. And he did this great presentation, trying to encourage us. And so without having any jobs lined up yet again, I left my solid job at the creative firm. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, the one contact I have, his name's Sam Sullivan. He had happened to work on a movie called Focus. And
not the Will Smith film.
Oh, the Will Smith film. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He worked on the Will Smith film with Mike Matzdorf, and so I got to know Mike Matzdorf through Sam Sullivan, who is the brother of the son-in-law of the lady that I taught at the Apple store in Tulsa. And through Mike, I was able to get this job on O.J. Speaks and the Secret Tapes of the O.J. Case with Chuck Braverman.
Yeah, all of a sudden you became somewhat of an evangelist for Final Cut 10. I mean, at least in social media.
Right.
On Facebook posts, on Twitter posts, it's all Patrick Southern talking about the positive things about Final Cut Pro 10.
Well, share some of those. What makes you excited about Final Cut 10? I'm a little biased. I think Final Cut 10 is kind of cool too, but
Right.
you're working in the trenches and I'm teaching it. So what do you like about it?
There are a number of things. Probably the first thing that got me when working in Final Cut 10 was the ease of use with the magnetic timeline. A lot of people buck and fight against it, but I feel like there's a lot in the magnetic timeline that is extremely useful. You know, switching shots around is super easy. I remember in Final Cut 7, you had the F keys, like F11, 12, and 9, I think, where your insert and overwrite and replace, I don't even remember at this point. And I always had trouble because I always wanted to, you know, change the brightness on my computer, and having the hold function got a little bit weary. So having Q, W, E, and D now to do my primary edit functions into the timeline, I loved. And now, having worked a year in non-scripted, one of the things that I've come to love is Lumberjack, and a very little-known feature of Lumberjack, the transcript mode. So the ability to take your transcript and then tie it to your footage in Final Cut and search within the browser in the timeline index has been, like, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a very, very big fan of that tool.
Well, I'm sure Philip and Greg are watching right now. So
I'm happy
it'll make
for
them
that.
feel good.
I was just thinking, you came to LA, you knew exactly one person, you took a course, you met another person, and clearly the way that people get jobs anywhere, not just in LA, is the people that know them and know of them. But there's also marketing involved. How do you go about marketing yourself? How do you tell the world that you're here? And what's worked and what hasn't?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of it does start out as word of mouth, but oddly enough, I met Mike Matzdorf originally through Twitter. So of all things, he was on Twitter talking about Final Cut. And he said, yes, I just worked on this movie for Warner Brothers. And I said, oh, I had a friend who worked on a movie at Warner Brothers in Final Cut as well. And I told him that it was my friend Sam, and he said, oh, Sam Messman? And I said, no, not Sam Messman. So oddly enough, I've found that Twitter and Facebook have been the two tools that I've gotten the most work through in the last year, which is very different. So as odd as it may seem, hashtagging things FCP 10 and then searching through that thread and looking for other people who are interested can help you tie into a network of people who assist or edit in Final Cut. And you know, it's been situations where somebody that I've met through Twitter or Facebook hasn't been able to do a job and has said, hey, would you like to potentially do this job? And I usually say, yes, absolutely.
Well, you principally do assistant editor work as opposed to editing. And there's a big difference between what editors do and what assistant editors do. How would you describe the role of the assistant editor? And when you're assigned to a gig for the first time, what do you do? What's your workflow?
That's a great question. In terms of the difference between an editor and an assistant, I feel it's a very catch-22 situation becoming an assistant, because you're both expected to be the person who knows the most about the application, and also it's, you know, you're one way into post-production, so you have to know all of the ins and outs of the software, or at least seemingly so. And then when it comes to editing, you have to know story inside and out. So assistant editing is very, very technical in terms of, you know, you need to know how to make a multicam clip. You need to know how to troubleshoot the software if something breaks. You need to know how to be able to organize the footage and get it to a place where the editor doesn't have to think about all the technical stuff, so that when it comes to working with the footage, they're simply thinking of story. So
Do assistant editors every once in a while go into the editor's room when he's having problems and actually fix his computer and fix his application and fix the problem that he's having?
Oh, yes.
Do they really?
I have multiple times, maybe not all assistant editors, but yes, I've definitely had, I don't know of an editor that I've worked with for more than a week that hasn't asked me to come in and, you know, hey, my computer's acting slow. Or,
You can hear the editor in the other room. You know exactly what you have to do. Got to go in there and fix his computer.
yeah. Oh, there's a lot of that. And being that all of the stuff I've worked on so far has been Final Cut 10, a lot of editors I'm working with, it's their first time working with Final Cut 10. So they'll often start out with me in the room with them and, hey, Patrick, how do you do this again? So,
But is it principally a technical hat that you wear? Do you ever make a creative decision?
there are times when I will help with the creative process. For example, on OJ Speaks,
You were an editor on that, right?
I was an assistant, but I did with the producer. We did the first assembly. So before the editor ever got any of the material, Tom Jennings and I went through and we laid out the entire story beginning to end, and it was about 4 hours longer than than what you see on television. And then David Tillman, the editor, would come through and shorten things. I have since done editing for Tom at his company, but I was principally an assistant on that project.
But again, as an assistant, you're expected really to organize the media, ingest and output, and keep track of everything, keep the equipment working, but not necessarily to contribute creatively. Is that a true statement?
You're not expected as part of your responsibilities, but there are times when somebody will ask your opinion or, you know, say, hey, I could use help with maybe finding some moments. So there are opportunities in terms of finding footage and knowing where footage is or what might potentially go well in a story beat. That you can contribute creatively without forcing yourself on on the editor.
Are you confident in your abilities as a storyteller?
I'm not a Tom Jennings or a Chuck Braverman or a David Tillman, but I'm fairly confident. I did spend a year and a half at the creative firm as a producer and an editor, so I am fairly confident in my storytelling, yes.
Okay, so let's put your assistant editor hat back on. The biggest challenge that somebody has is how do they get organized for a Final Cut 10 edit? I've just dumped a basket full of camera cards on you, and you've got an empty RAID, you've got a brand new computer, software's installed. How do you set it up?
So basically, first thing I always do is I use ShotPut Pro to move everything onto the new drive so that I make sure that I've got my checksums. I want to make sure that the transfer took place safely. And then usually there's some sort of organization that's, you know, communicated between me and the editor. You know, here are the story beats that we expect this story is going to have. And so we'll break it down into events. A lot of Final Cut editors like working in one event. Everybody that I've worked with, we've done multiple events, you know, for the different kinds of footage, whether it be archival footage, archival audio, so forth and so on. And then within that, we will use keyword collections. And I took a cue from Philip and Greg with Lumberjack and have decided that I like creating folders for people, places, activities, and then if there are any other logical collections of keywords that I can put together, then I'll create a folder for that. So I've got my keyword collections that I may not even have tagged anything with, and I'll go ahead and set those up within folders. And then as we're watching through footage, then you apply your keyword collections so that footage will start to fill into those collections.
And you store the media all on a single RAID, and you've got it all on a single device, or do you have it across multiple hard disks, and is there an organizational pattern there as well?
Depends on the budget, Larry.
It really does depend on the budget. Some budgets, will do a mirrored drive if you're,
Oh, wow.
yeah, if you don't have a whole lot of money, then the mirrored drive is one way to go. And then the way that I prefer to work is with Sam Messman's Share Station, where everything's all on shared storage. You've got a nice RAID that is then backing up to an additional drive.
That thing is powerful.
Oh,
and
it's
a
a
beauty.
thing.
So as you're looking forward, what projects are you looking to do in the future?
Oh, that's a great question. Right now, documentary is the place for me. I enjoy the speed of the work.
Yeah, and you can also change the world with that wonderful story if you get lucky enough to be involved in that wonderful story.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's a very
only documentary. Yeah, I love it.
yeah, me too.
Patrick, thanks for joining us today. Patrick Southern is an editor and an assistant editor working in Final Cut and a variety of other tools based in LA. And Patrick, it's been fun chatting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To stay connected and receive updates from The Buzz, sign up for our free weekly newsletter now. Or you can learn more about us on our website. And thanks for watching. The digital production buzz.